Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 2. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. Dave, day off for the Steelers of training camp and a much-needed one and a preview of a tough week ahead. The pads come on Tuesday, and Pittsburgh will have 6 straight practices from Tuesday through Sunday. So a lot on tap for the Steelers, but today's episode will recap what happened the first 4 days. Dave, how you doing?
Happy Monday to you. Exciting first 4 days of camp. And as you stated, tough stretch here, 6 days in a row. So I want you hydrating plenty today because and get your body ready for pads coming on Tuesday. And I think the fun part about this upcoming week as well too is Friday. Obviously they'll be at the high school for the Friday night lights practice, and to give everybody a look ahead, that's normally when Pat Kerwin and
Jim Miller
are out there at Latrobe, and usually ahead of time they record, 5, 6, 7 interviews, everything from Art Rooney to second, usually Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, the top players, and we usually are able to pass those along very quickly as they come across the radio as well too. So exciting week, and I think first and foremost, we'll probably recap what all has happened with the first 4 days of training camp practice 2025. And part of that, obviously, will be going over the health of the team. So why don't you, for those that maybe have missed some episodes of the special edition podcast, let's start there and update the health of this team.
Sure, and Tuesday will be a big sign, who's in pads, who's not, and the injury report will probably grow throughout these next 6 days. But players who did not practice going into Sunday's practice was Isaac Seumalo, who remains on NFI, Cordarrelle Patterson, not on an injured list, but you can call him MIA because I haven't seen him in training camp so far. Jeremiah Moon with a calf injury did not work in practice. Offensive tackle Broderick Jones, a headline name. He only practiced a tiny bit. Mike Tomlin calling that a soft tissue injury. Same with Montana. Lamonius Craig, one of the reserve wide receivers. Safety Quindell Johnson working on the side. We'll see if he gets out there in full participation on Tuesday. And potentially the most significant injury was to rookie tight end DJ Thomas Jones with a left ankle foot, was getting examined. He left on the cart. Tomlin hinting that could be a serious injury, so would not be surprising if by Tuesday you heard the waived injured for DJ Thomas Jones.
All right. Sad situation there. What do you make of the whole Cordarrelle Patterson thing? We haven't spent we spent a little time on it, but this is a guy that we kind of wondered, once they got past the draft and drafted Caleb Johnson and signed Kenneth Gainwell and went out and added Trey Sermon to the offseason roster and got a couple other running backs on the roster to help fill out the lines there. We talked about, he doesn't cost this team a lot as far as salary goes, but the fact that he's not practicing, and really Mike Tomlin, I don't think, has talked about him at all in any of these post-practice media sessions here. What do you make about the situation with him?
It's a great question. I really don't have a good answer for you. I know, Mark Cabaldi the other day mentioned and maybe theorized, could they be holding on to him and stashing Patterson to try to trade him at cutdowns? But what kind of value is a 34-year-old not practicing Cordarrelle Patterson going to have coming off the year that he did? So I really don't know what's happening. My initial thought of why he was kept to this point throughout the spring and throughout the entirety of the offseason was, well, they want to get to camp, make sure the group is healthy, get eyes on some new faces, the rookie Caleb Johnson, a newcomer, new signing, and Kenneth Gainwell, and maybe just make sure everyone gets there and looks as advertised. And I think so far Johnson and Gainwell have done that, but maybe it's just a true insurance policy and they're going to hold on to him for a little bit longer.
Yeah, and several have wondered. Well, he is a guy that didn't last year. He show up a little bit overweight and all. Was he a PUP guy last year or no?
He did start on one of those lists. I don't know if it was a weight thing. There was a soft tissue injury that maybe was related to weight. He had made a comment during OTAs of something like, I'm a 2 out of 10 in terms of being in shape right now. So I think that's kind of where you're getting that comment from. But he didn't practice for the first week and a half, 2 weeks last year. But you saw him. You saw him working on the
Right.
side. He was in a black hoodie, easy to spot. He may have been out there, a lot of people on the field, but I have not seen him so far.
All right, I can't remember if I saw somebody take a snap of him or not. Here's the thing: if he wasn't conditioned, and if this was a conditioning thing, he'd be on active PUP,
Hmm.
right? So,
Absolutely.
just to protect themselves in case he had to go to let's say reserve PUP at the start of the season. So, it's probably not related to that. At all. I'm willing to bet. So it is a bit curious that you're tying up a 91 man roster spot on a guy that, for lack of a better word, is MIA at this point. And even if he is there, he's not doing anything. So it
Now,
will
now they
be.
have claimed it's an injury, right? So why wouldn't he be on NFI or PUP because of that?
Have they claimed it's an injury?
I thought on the first day Mike Tomlin made a reference to a day-to-day minor injury for a guy like
Mm.
Patterson.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought he said that.
Uh, I'll have to go back and double check the transcript there, but you would think he would be on PUP at the start of camp because he hadn't practiced since day one, and they knew probably going into day one that he wasn't going to practice. So it is a bit confusing overall that if indeed this is injury related, that why he isn't on PUP, because I mean it costs you nothing really to do that. It just protects you in case he has to go on reserve PUP at the start of the season.
But the real injury news right now is Broderick Jones, who I think by most people's measure, myself included, didn't have an ideal start to training camp, even in these non-padded sessions where it can be difficult to evaluate offensive lineman mentality shift when the pads come on. Competition periods increase. It really feels like football. But even still, there were certainly some moments where it felt like Jones was struggling in pass protection and then barely practiced yesterday with what Tomlin called a soft tissue injury. He called it day to day, but in training camp, these things can linger. They don't want to push these guys too much and make a minor injury into a more significant one. And for a guy like Jones, he needs all the reps possible. So we'll see his status for Tuesday. Generally, not a great sign to practice on a quick turnaround with any sort of soft tissue injury. I mean, we'll see, but this is not how you wanted to start the 2025 conversation with Broderick Jones.
What do you think about all this talk about his weight and all?
Yeah, some are theorizing, I know Cavalli has as well, that, he's too small. First of all, if you get dusted by Nick Herbig on a spin move, it's not because you're too small. It's, you think it'd be more athletic and it would help you out even more. So if there was an issue about point of attack and play strength and run blocking, you might sit there and say the weight's an issue. I don't see that as the issue. It's not been the issue in the past. You talk about all the laundry list of problems in Jones's career, weight and size and shape has not really been one of those. I think it was a good thing he got his body in shape. And yeah, he looked small, but you look at him even last year, he didn't look like a typical offensive tackle the way his, build was and his lack of body fat. So that to me is not the problem.
All right, and explain Dylan Cook being the first man up at left tackle in your viewpoint, and we'll go over what Mike Tomlin had to say about that.
Right, Dylan Cook replacing Broderick Jones as first team left tackle yesterday, and that might raise some eyebrows. Why not Calvin Anderson? Why is Cook getting the nod? But on Saturday, they had flipped Cook and Anderson. They started camp with Cook at right tackle, Anderson left tackle. Then they flipped them for Saturday's practice where Cook ran second team left tackle, Anderson second team right tackle. That bled into Sunday, and so I think the team's thought was once Jones went down, don't need to switch them back. Let's just have Cook elevate the reps and keep Anderson, who needs reps at right tackle. So training camp is partially logistics. It's not just about let's play our best guy there like we would in a game scenario. So you're not going to go ahead and flip those tackles back when your intent was to get Anderson, who could be the swing tackle and probably will be some right tackle work. So I wouldn't, and Mike Tomlin kind of said this as well, wouldn't read too much into Cook replacing Broderick Jones, but Cook's a guy that needs a good camp. It's a bubble player trying to fight for a spot, and the more reps for him, the better.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin was asked, Dylan Cook, is he kind of the leader in the clubhouse for the swing tackle role? And Mike Tomlin said, we're just acclimating. Certainly, he's a veteran guy that's been around and has served in that capacity before. I'm not assuming anything at this juncture, at this early stage of development regarding specific roles and specialization. It's not like Dylan Cook's played a lot of regular season NFL snaps, even though he has been around the team for quite some time now. So I think the most interesting aspect of Dylan Cook and Calvin Anderson is let's see what happens on Tuesday when the pads go on, and we see which way the lines roll out. Dylan Cook he hasn't even played an NFL snap yet. So,
Right.
there's that to consider as well too. Look, we had high expectations last time at this point of the off season when it came to Dylan Cook, and unfortunately he had foot injury at the start, and ended up derailing him, and obviously didn't get anything out of him overall last season there. So a little bit too early probably to read into, and Mike Tomlin said as much, as Dylan Cook being the first guy up. As you stated, it might just been the way the rotation of the lines of the sides to get those guys time on different sides. And okay, he was scheduled to be on the left side for practice that day, and the guy ahead of him wasn't ready to go, so you just move the next guy up in the line.
Exactly. That is exactly how I think it played out yesterday.
All right. And obviously, as you stated, we hope to see Broderick Jones not miss too many practices because he needs them.
And what if Broderick Jones is not the player Pittsburgh hopes and needs him to be? What do they do? Do they just try to power through the year? Do they mitigate and give Jones help? Do they look for alternatives? What do you think?
I think regardless of what happens here in camp with Broderick Jones, you've got to be taking a look around the NFL at maybe a veteran or two that ends up being on the outs for whatever reason. Obviously a lot of rookie tackles drafted around the league that probably going to take the spot of maybe a little bit more expensive veterans. So yeah, the Omar Khan just regardless of what happens here, they because of who, and we talked about this a ton, what the depth is anyway. They should be looking this offseason. So I would imagine that would be, and look, they're not going to go out there and spend $5-6 million on a tackle. I don't think at this point, whoever that player might be, but you should be looking around the NFL during these preseason games, and they'll obviously have scouts in the building for these games. But I'll tell you what Omar Khan will say. We're always looking to make our team better, top to bottom, all the way down to the 53rd man. So if there's someone out there that we think that can help this team, we'll look at it and we'll potentially add them. And that would be his response to it. And that's the response I would expect it to be.
Agreed. And you're right. They're going to look. I'm sure we'll talk about a list of names come cut down time about who Pittsburgh could or should be interested in. But as well as I do, finding good offensive tackles at this time of year, cut downs or not, is extremely difficult because there's a scarcity on the position overall, and teams who have good depth and teams who have talent want to preserve that in case of their own injuries that can happen so quickly. So what's going to be out there? There'll be some names, I'm sure, but what's the quality of those names and getting them in the building on the fly? Think back to 2 years ago. Why did Pittsburgh keep Dylan Cook, who was sight unseen, never played an NFL snap? Because they knew if they cut him, he was going to probably get cleaned off of waivers. And so teams just want to hold on to their offensive tackle talent, both young and old. So I don't know. Broderick Jones, I talked about him, player under the most pressure, one of the X factors of the season to protect Aaron Rodgers, and the importance of this offensive line to coalesce and play to its talent, and the question about the depth, and those things are still staring me and this team right in the face after the first 4 days of training camp.
And look, no pads are on yet. You don't want to sound the warning sirens this early and all,
Sure.
but not it's not a great start to camp for him, is it?
Right, and if it was just the rough kind of 4 days and he was healthy, that would be one thing, but now you have the injury component to it too. Okay, is he gonna be ready this week for a really important week of practice with pads on, with a question mark surrounding that now? If it's a hamstring that's tight, if you have a training camp hamstring injury, we don't know exactly that's what it is, but it's a soft tissue thing. It might be something like that. That in training camp can take a couple weeks for you to get back, and Broderick Jones and his team can ill afford a couple week wait.
I agree. All right,
All right,
where
Dave.
to from now?
Let's talk about some other headlines of the past week. Pittsburgh, the one big transaction they've made so far, not a big transaction, but a fairly notable one as training camp is concerned. The signing of veteran safety Chuck Clark, former Baltimore Raven with the Jets last season, to add some safety depth to this team after the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. Dominique Davis, a backup nose tackle, was released in a corresponding move to add Clark. So Clark's already gotten in team sessions, spoken with the media, put his hand in the pile right away. Apparently got off the plane, went right to practice, and got to work.
Yeah, and Mike Tomlin was asked about him after practice yesterday, and he says, I've been really impressed with his ability to digest schematics in a short period of time and execute defense. I'm not completely surprised by it because we've competed against him over the years. I just know he has a reputation as a really solid professional. I think he's displayed that in the short period of time that he's been here. And as we talked during the special edition podcast, right after that move was made, one of the things that just jumped out to me from what I knew about Chuck Clark, ahead of this was he was regarded as a very smart player. This is a guy that obviously spent early career in Baltimore as part of that defense. He became expendable, so to speak, when the team drafted Kyle Hamilton. There was a lot of chatter at the time of what would happen with Chuck Clark on a little bit more expensive salary once Hamilton joined the fold over there. And I think the biggest takeaway is you've got a guy that wore the green dot for several games in Baltimore. Really regarded as a smart guy, good at communication, and the Steelers can certainly use a guy like that. So he's a guy that's flexible, can play down in the box, can play deep safety position. Obviously joins a Steelers defense where he's familiar with working with guys like Patrick Queen, DeShon Elliott. So there's a little, at least you have some familiarity with communicating and playing with guys and trusting them as far as that goes. So this to me is a very, very smart ad. And it will be interesting, I guess, moving forward to see kind of the division of labor, if you will, between guys like Chuck Clark and Juan Thornhill, obviously another veteran to come over this offseason from the Browns after he was cut by them earlier in the offseason. So I guess the conversation goes back to you is what do you think about this addition overall and the player in Chuck Clark? And B, what does this do to, because, you had to work with what you were given with at the time of heading into training camp. We all like to do these 53-man roster projections way out in front of this thing. You only had 3 safeties per se on your roster, with one of those being Miles Killebrew. What does that do to maybe your look ahead about this team potentially keeping 4 with your with it being obviously would be DeShon Elliott, Juan Thornhill, Chuck Clark, and probably Miles Killebrew?
I like the signing. We talked about it a little bit. Clark's a familiar name. I remember his versatility in Baltimore, those chess pieces in those dime packages. I mentioned names in a previous show like Anthony Levine and Tony Jefferson, guys that moved around. Now, Clark was really more of a full-time starter for them, but wore a lot of hats, playing the post, playing strong safety, playing over slot, playing down in the box, and overcame an injury in 2023 and was beat up a little bit last year too. So there's a little concern there, but yeah, I think it was a good, shrewd signing for a team that really did need some safety depth throughout training camp at the very least. Now, his odds on making the 53 in my roster construction, we'll see. I want to get eyes on him some more, but probably put him on the bubble right now. And if he plays well, he'll probably play his way onto the roster. And if not, he'll play his way off of it. So if he does get kept, then you have, 4 safeties, true safeties in Thornhill, Elliott, Killebrew, special teamer, but safety nonetheless, and Clark. and then I'd have to take off a corner at that point. And so who'd be that seventh corner that I had before who would get lopped off and probably would come down to James Pierre or I guess Beanie Bishop because Eccles is making it. I still think Trice is going to make it. So one of those two guys might get the squeeze. Pierre, you would think, would probably be the most likely guy to get squeezed of the two. We talked about Beanie Bishop. It's now the backup slot corner. Nothing is locked in there with him. But the reason why I put three safeties initially was the assumption Jalen Ramsey would get safety work, and he's gotten plenty of safety work in Pittsburgh's base 3-4 defense. So that in some sense is your number 4 safety, but also a starting safety in those base packages.
Right. And looking back at last season with Clark, obviously he's missed some time with the injury and all like that. But even in the time that he played 9 special team snaps last year. He's obviously up there in age at this point. A little over 32 years of age. And let's see if I can look at his. It's been long story short. It's been a few years since he's been asked to play a large amount of special teams.
Right, and you think if he does make this team is going to have to. I know Killebrew will get a lot of snaps there, but you probably need somebody else. But you need Chuck Clark to be a multi-phase guy. If he were to make the 53, probably not. Not in terms of being a core 4 phase type of guy. Maybe 2 units, so, I don't know, kick return or something like that. So we'll just have to wait and see.
2022, he logged 74 special team snaps. 67 of those came on the field goal extra point block team. 2 in kick coverage, 4 in kick return, and 1 in punt coverage. So that's the skinny on him from the 2022 season on special teams with Clark.
In your mind, you had Quindell Johnson as your 4th safety on your initial pre-camp 53, right?
Yeah, I would just swap those two now.
Okay, that's what I thought. Fair enough. And Johnson is a little banged
hurt.
up right
He's
now.
hurt right now. That's never a great sign at the start of camp, especially. Did he say it's soft tissue with him?
Tomlin's not addressed it at all. I don't think anyone else has even noted that Quindell Johnson has not been healthy the last 2 days, but he was working relatively vigorously on the side, so that's generally a sign he's going to get back sooner than later. But again, these soft tissue things, if it is that, do linger, do take longer than you think this time of year. Teams will be cautious, and so we'll check on it Tuesday.
All right.
Dave, some other big news of the week. The Steelers announcing their 2025 Hall of Honor class and some familiar names to Steelers fans, young and old. 3 players being inducted into the Hall of Honor this year in Joey Porter Sr., Ben Roethlisberger, and Maurkice Pouncey. Joey Porter Sr. was on hand that day. It was announced to thank the crowd and be honored by Mike Tomlin and the team. So 3 very familiar names, and it makes me feel old. I'm sure it makes you feel old as well, Dave. These guys that you watched, grew up watching, Ben just retired, Pouncey just retired, are now entering into Steelers lore forever.
Yeah, I mean, hard to disagree with the selections there. Good to see Pouncey and Roethlisberger go in together in the Hall of Honor. What can you say that hasn't been said about Joey Porter and the time he spent in Pittsburgh? I think a lot of people were kind of hoping and wishing for Craig Wolfley to be part of that, especially on with him passing just a short time ago. I have a feeling at some point Craig Wolfley will be in there. It just, I guess they just decided that this wasn't the year to do that. Could the list of, I'm trying to even remember who's in and who's out at this point, but you probably could have made some arguments for one other guy to be included in that. But I mean, for the class overall, it's hard to disagree with that, and it'll be fun. Come the weekend that they honor those guys.
And then next year will be Hall of Fame for Ben Roethlisberger, which will be another big story too. But congrats to all 3 of those guys, and all well-deserved, clearly.
Absolutely.
Maurkice Pouncey ever going to make the Hall of Fame?
I do kind of wonder about that. Center's one of those positions, right? That it's it's really tough. How many centers are actually in it? Who was the last one? Was Mawai?
I was thinking Mawai was the last one.
And how many centers in total were in the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
That's a good question. I can try to check here quickly. Dirt Dawson, Jim Otto, of course, Mike Webster, the Steelers center tradition is rich.
Right.
Dwight Stevenson, Mawai, Jim Langer, McTinglehoff, which I think was a senior vote thing. That looks like the list. And so that's what, 4, 5, 6, 7. You also have Jason Kelsey, who I assume will eventually get into the Hall. Will Jeff Saturday do it? Maybe not. According to PFR, Pouncey looking pretty borderline.
Yeah. How many first team All Pros did Maurkice Pouncey have?
2.
2-time All Pros. So he's got a couple of All Pros, and he had 9 Pro Bowl. He's going to be borderline. I don't think he's a slam dunk. I obviously don't think he's going to go in when Ben Roethlisberger. We could be sitting here waiting a little while here. If indeed he gets in at all. But I do think he's a borderline guy. I don't think he's a slam dunk guy. If he had maybe 1 more or 2 more All Pros, I think that would have helped him there. But he obviously is a Super Bowl champion, so he's got that going for him. But it's going to be interesting. I think he might be waiting a while if indeed he gets in at all.
I would call him borderline outside looking in because the resume, like you said, is very good, but the Hall of Fame level for the few centers who have made it might not quite be there. And offensive linemen in general have waited a long time. Faneca waited forever, which was far too long. That was a crying shame how long it took Faneca to get in. Mawai himself waited a decade to get the call. So it's not going to be first ballot. It's not going to be for a while if it happens with Pouncey.
Right. Agreed.
All right, Dave, what other big news? With training camp, I feel in a sense so in the loop, but also so out of the loop because I miss a lot of the media stuff. I miss some of the happenings of the day, just focused on training camp. So kind of tell me maybe some of the most notable comments. I know that Mike Tomlin, Aaron Rodgers sat down with NFL Network's Kyle Brandt. I listened to those interviews. They were very good. Some things to talk about there. So we can start there if you would like, or if there's any other pressing media or news related events to the start of training camp, feel free to go there.
Yeah, I thought Kyle Brandt did a really, really good job with the interviews with both Aaron Rodgers and Mike Tomlin. More so with the Aaron Rodgers interview than Mike Tomlin because he in the interview with Mike Tomlin, he talked about the Tomlinisms and it started to look like it was just going to be a greatest hits interview with Mike Tomlin, but there was one interesting thing that he asked him that Mike Tomlin rebutted to during that, and I'll save that for last. But the Aaron Rodgers interview, there were several aspects of it overall, and just Aaron talked about kind of the courtship of the Steelers and Mike Tomlin and why he's excited to, why he made the decision to play for Mike Tomlin, and it sounded overall, and I don't have the exact quote from that up here, but Aaron never felt pressured from Mike Tomlin. It was more of just staying in communication, and it never got to the point to hear Aaron talk of hey, how's the family doing, and then go right into this is what you can do for me. It was more of, hey, we're just conversation as if he was just checking in on an old friend. And Aaron evidently never felt pressured of, hey, when are you going to show up? What can you do? When can you start for us? And I think that relaxed Aaron, and they gave Aaron plenty of space throughout, all that time during the off season. And Aaron obviously talked about, being back in Malibu and going through things with some members in his family, and obviously got married and those kind of things. So it was better to hear Aaron's side of that. It seemed more than anything that he liked the way Mike Tomlin treated him throughout the process, that he never felt rushed into any of this. Just Mike Tomlin just checking in and say, hey, what's up, more than anything. So that was one initial takeaway that I had from that.
I think it's a really interesting and telling and revealing comment from Aaron Rodgers, because you're right. The implication that Rodgers had made was either from past coaches or past experiences was whenever he would talk to a coach, maybe about coming to a team or just something about the team, it felt like there was always this underbelly of, what do you want from me, in terms of the coach wanting something from Aaron Rodgers. And he didn't get that sense from Mike Tomlin, just truly having a conversation, no implication of, hey, Aaron, how's it going? How's life? Hey, when are you signing here? Like there wasn't any of that in Rodgers' mind. And so that really made him feel comfortable and want to play. Because obviously Rodgers did not have to play. He could have retired and rode off into the sunset and been the Hall of Fame first ballot quarterback that he will eventually be. And so Mike Tomlin certainly has his warts. We'll talk about it, but his ability to connect and kind of give players what they need, and you talk about why players want to play for Mike Tomlin, this is why. This is a great example of Tomlin having the right approach to be patient. And even though it frustrated me to many ends about having to wait 3 months for Rodgers to decide, it was the course the team decided was the best way to convince Rodgers to come to Pittsburgh, and I think Rodgers basically confirmed that.
Yep. The second thing was quite interesting that I want to talk about, and this stems from the criticism from Terry Bradshaw several weeks ago about, Aaron just needs to stay out in California and eat some bark. And I mean, Terry really went after him hard there, and Kyle Brandt, didn't shy away from that. He asked Aaron Rodgers about that Terry Bradshaw criticism. And I kind of wondered when I heard that question live in real time which way Aaron was going to go with this, because Aaron can be very back in your face at times, and had he taken this in a different direction, it would have been newsworthy. His response was going to be newsworthy either way, but I think most people would have expected him to kind of just dust it off and shut up, old man, that kind of thing, and kind of take digs back at Terry Bradshaw. But he took the high road, as you would like to say. He says, "I whisper to the gods every single day. I've known Terry for a long time, being part of Fox. Terry's a legend. He's an absolute legend. He won 4 Super Bowls. He's had a legendary career in the media. But Terry, like a lot of people, doesn't know me, and he's got an idea of what he thinks about me based on what I've done, the documentary, what I've said, Darkness Retreat, whatever the hell you want to talk about. I'd love to get to know Terry on a deeper level. I feel like he gave me a chance to get to know him. Then we'd have a good friendship. For me, I have nothing but the utmost amount of respect and deference for what the greats have done, because they laid the foundation for us to be able to play in this great game, to be paid like kings, and to carry on the tradition of excellence that guys like the Bradshaws of the world in the 70s, and Bart Starr in the 60s, and Lombardi and Joe Montana and Steve Young and Troy Aikman and Brett Favre and all the greats. We're standing on the backs of those guys. It's because how they played and how they carried themselves that we're able to have this opportunity to play this great game, to get paid really well, to set ourselves up for our future. So I'd love to get to know Terry on a deeper level if he's open to it, and maybe we can go chew some bark or whatever the hell he's talking about together. That's an A++ response, because 2, not only are you talking about, a major media guy, former NFL player, Hall of Famer, however you want to classify it, taking digs at him. But it's Terry Bradshaw. It's a member of the organization that you play for now. So if you go back after him with your nails out and fangs out and all like that, there's going to be pushback from fans in this organization. Say, hey, take it easy on Terry. He's a legend, But he gave Terry his props. He said he'd like to get to know him. He talked about how him and these other players, laid the groundwork for the quarterbacks and NFL players of today to kind of do what they love and make the money that they make. So he showed Terry the utmost respect, even though he could have taken this in a different direction. And really, and look, this has gotten some run. I don't know if this has gotten the run that it got from the initial Terry. It's always the initial remarks that tend to get the most run, and not so much the rebuttal, I guess. And maybe because Aaron Rodgers took the higher road in this, it won't get the amount of run.
For sure. For
because it's not as controversial, right? And people love controversy and love people attacking other people in today's internet, social media world, and all like that. But he could not. He could not have given a better answer for all the reasons that I just and to me it sounded sincere as well too. Look, he he's made his uh assumptions based on what he's seen in the documentary and the darkness retreat and all, but he says Terry doesn't really know me, and if Terry's open to getting to know me, I'll be glad to sit down with him. And what this effectively done is lobbed this right back over the net, if you will, and it makes Terry you're up, Terry. Especially the timing of all this. I'm sure we'll start seeing the Fox guys being more prevalent in the media. And at some point, the next time Terry goes on the radio or what have you, if the person interviewing him's doing their job, they're going to read this off verbatim to what Aaron Rodgers told Kyle Brandt. And I would expect Terry to go in retreat mode and say, look, I was probably wrong to say the things. I don't know Aaron Rodgers, and maybe I do need to sit down with him and get to know him. But for a start of camp, and especially coming off of the things that Terry Bradshaw said about Aaron Rodgers and how probably most expected Aaron to handle the response to this, I don't think he could have done it any better, Alex.
You said Bradshaw might go into retreat mode. Will he go into darkness retreat mode? But my dumb joke for the day.
Yeah.
No,
No, I just think, look, Terry, we're going to start seeing more Terry this time of year.
Sure, he'll be asked.
Yeah, and he should be asked, and it will be. He effectively just, like I said, took this grenade that was thrown at him and gently lobbed it right back over into the foxhole that Terry's in.
Like I said earlier, in the throngs of training camp, I miss a lot of what's happening during the day. So I didn't even get to see Rodgers' comments until I listened to the whole interview. And as Kyle Brandt is reading off the comments Bradshaw made verbatim, which just our hat tip to our Troy Montgomery. He's the one who initially found those comments on a obscure Chicago radio station, kind of drummed up that whole story a couple weeks ago. So kudos to him for getting that party started. But when Kyle Brandt read off the question, I was like, all right, hold on to your butts. DEFCON 5 levels. What's Rodgers going to say? This could get interesting. But you said it perfectly, Dave. Rodgers took the high road. He was gracious. He certainly could have said, Terry, you big idiot, and inflamed this story even more. And had he done so, it would have become a giant story again. But he said everything perfectly. He gave him respect. But he also challenged the point, too, and said, let's get to know each other and let's have a conversation about it. So I think it was a really great answer and a gracious answer by Aaron Rodgers when it certainly didn't need to be, maybe didn't deserve to be with how, harsh Bradshaw was in his critiques there. So I'm with you, Dave. I think just really well said overall by Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and I look, from everything that Aaron Rodgers has done and set up until this point, most recently, especially on the political kind of political topic type landscape, he's an easy guy to he's easy to be a polarizing guy, especially with the media coverage today. And yes, not everybody agrees with kind of his viewpoints on life and whatever political aspect, and I'm not going to get into any of those. People are going to believe whatever they want to believe and take his comments that he's had, however they're going to take him. But then you throw in the darkness retreat, and you talk about the documentary, and people are going to form opinions of him. And then obviously he's had some kind of weird press conferences over the years, and obviously front and center with McAfee for 40 minutes, 45 minutes at a time in interviews. And a lot of people just don't like that. They believe players should practice 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, unless they're undefeated in a season, then it's okay to talk and all. And I believe at this point, Aaron Rodgers has done a great job of at least initially here, of quieting some of the narratives that have been against him upon his leaving the Jets. And look, he wasn't happy with how the Jets treated him out the door, and he said as much about flying over there to New York and sitting down for what he thought he was going to be a 3-hour meeting. And basically they didn't care what he had to say, and he's addressed all that. And there's obviously these players in Pittsburgh that had never played with Aaron Rodgers, that only kind of knew him either from a hello after a game or what the media tells them. I think a lot of them probably, and we've heard several Steelers players comment about this since Aaron Rodgers has arrived as well too. Just a guy that really loves football. And even Deshaun Elliott, who was another one in the news cycle this offseason for commenting on Aaron Rodgers' rumors about him landing in Pittsburgh and all. And Deshaun Elliott basically comments said, leave his ass in the retirement home. He has come out now in an interview this week and says, look, I'm a troll. He's an all-pro and he's a GOAT. He's going to be a gold jacket guy one day. Honestly, when he got here, we communicated, we talked. He's a great person and a great football player. So whatever the media's put out there is BS in his opinion. He says, I respect him a lot. I told him that I respect him and I apologize to him for things I was saying about him. Honestly, he's a great man and he has a great heart. So I appreciate him and he's funny as hell. And I mean, what better way at the start of camp to clear up all of this potential dirty air and what people maybe thought about you. And I think Aaron's going about his way to do that, not only with the national media, but with his own teammates that might have had an assumption about him one way before he arrived in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, my one thought on Rodgers this offseason, at least one of several, was there was a wrong narrative that he would be a bad teammate and wouldn't mentor young guys like Will Howard and wouldn't, have good relationships with teammates. I think that's the opposite based on the scope of his entire career. Now, does this mean it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows with Aaron Rodgers this season? No, he's going to say something controversial. Something's going to come up. We'll talk about some incendiary comment at some point during the season, I'm sure. And I've said before, and I'll say again, his time in Pittsburgh will be judged by how successful the team is. He's had a pretty tepid response from the fan base whenever he walks down the stairs for practice. It's not a lot of big cheers. You wouldn't know Aaron Rodgers is walking down the stairs whenever he does based on the crowd response. But if he wins, they'll love him. If he loses, they'll loathe him, and it'll be done. It'll be just one small chapter, and Pittsburgh will start the quarterback search anew in 2026 and put this Rodgers saga and chapter behind them. But I think as a teammate, Rodgers is a solid dude. People will like him, want to work with him, and that's good.
And specifically what he said on Will Howard, and he's already talked about Will Howard, I think, a couple of times since mandatory minicamp, but he was asked at the start of camp to give his comments on Will Howard. He says, I just like his approach. He's a good kid. He cares about it. He works hard. He listens. He's a good note taker. He's been picking my brain. I told him last night, he was in the room where he was talking about signals, and I said, what can I do for you? I want to be a support system for him and pass on anything I can. I don't want to overstep my bounds. If he wants to learn anything or pick my brain and be in my pocket, I'm all for it. So I'm looking forward to growing that friendship, but he has the ability and the talent. And when his time comes, I think he's going to have a great chance to be a long-term guy in the league. So, I mean, what else do you want Aaron Rodgers to say about a rookie quarterback in Pittsburgh that he's obviously going to play with for at least 1 year?
Yeah, and that's good to hear and see. And I know Rodgers talked about that during the spring, and so that's carried over. And just watching Rodgers at training camp, I have an article up this morning on some thoughts, really 10 thoughts on Aaron Rodgers' first 4 practices as a player, as a person, as a member of the Steelers organization. But just watching some of the conversations on the side with Zach Frazier, spent a lot of time with Mason McCormick, young offensive lineman. Getting to pick the brain of a Hall of Fame quarterback is certainly good for a guy like McCormick. Even talking to defensive players like DeMarvin Leal, stretch line one day, that kind of stuff. So it's all been good so far. But it is the summer. Everyone's undefeated right now, and when the game starts, that's really when this whole thing will get judged.
Look, I'm not sitting here saying everybody needs to change their opinion and you know, Aaron Rodgers needs to be the Time Man of the Year or the Humanitarian of the Year or win the Pulitzer or the Nobel Peace Prize or anything like that. He's going to be judged with what he does on the field, right? And if he comes out and has a bad start of the season and the Steelers are losing and for however things go, he's going to be judged on wins and losses, even though that's not an official stat. Technically, a lot more goes into it than just a quarterback. But I mean, that's going to be how he's judged, and that should be how he's judged at this point there.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously there's a lot of I got a lot of feedback on Twitter. I know you did as well too throughout this whole courtship part of the off season about, man, Aaron Rodgers, this is going to be a disaster. You see the Mike Tannenbaums, you see everybody taking their swings at him, saying this isn't going to go well, and it's going to and it's more so about not Aaron Rodgers the player, but just how he is as a teammate. There's been a lot of the narrative surrounded by around that so far. So at this point, until we have any other reason to talk otherwise, it only matters what the team and the coaches and all think about him at this point. But I think a lot of opinions probably within that locker room and team meetings and all have probably changed on Aaron Rodgers based on what those people thought they knew about him just from media reports and dealings with other teams. So that's the starting point. It's good that things like Elliott, all that's getting swept under the rug at this point. And I think you had a shot of him walking with Mason McCormick out to practice, and I think you probably seen him pull Frazier aside, and Aaron Rodgers does not just want this to be the footnote at the end of the Wikipedia page, right? And Aaron Rodgers went on to play one season in Pittsburgh, and it wasn't very good. Aaron Rodgers probably should have retired after the Jets cut him. He doesn't want the story to end that way. It sounds like he wants to do everything in his power to go out giving it his all and obviously winning, whatever that looks like with the Pittsburgh Steelers, because he'll be an easy target if this thing does go south just because of his play and the record. Will people say, "Yep, I told you so. He should have just retired," and he set the Steelers back a year or however it'll be framed.
Right. I mean, ultimately, this is going to be pass-fail. Did they succeed with Rodgers? Was there progression as a franchise? Did they win a playoff game? Did they compete and hopefully win the AFC North? All that kind of stuff. So a lot of this is going to be forgotten, and rightfully so, come September, October, January. But, I think so far so good.
Now, look, do I look forward to 40 minutes a week on Tuesday or whenever it happens with him on Pat McAfee? Yes and no.
No, I was going to say no, but
I mean, you do know that at some point he's going to say things that we're going to have to write about that are going to be characterized as, oh, why did he say that? Kind of thing there. But that's who he is. So, but at this point right now, I think enough. I think he's handled himself perfectly at this stage for a guy that only was present for 3 mandatory minicamp practices and four training camp practices so far.
Well said. All right, Dave, let's move on. Talk about some other players. Speaking with the media, Troy Fautanu, young second-year right tackle, missed most of his rookie season with a knee injury, returning healthy, practicing in full, spoke with the media, and talked about just trying to trust himself and trust that knee again and kind of get his legs under him, and in some ways, his legs firmly planted under him. Talked about getting some happy feet and trying to correct that with Pat Meyer working with him in a critical year 2 for Troy Fautanu.
I'd have happy feet too if I was lining up against TJ Watt as much. But look,
you'd keel over. You'd have dead feet.
Yeah,
You'd be on the ground.
Yeah. Look, what better test than to get back on the field and know what you're up against than having to go against the TJ Watts of the world during training camp. So the good thing with him, at least, is he cut his teeth to play, 53 snaps during the regular season last year. So he got a little small taste of it. He obviously played a little bit during the preseason as well, too. He knows the pressure that's on him as a former first round draft pick now. And we've talked a lot about this offensive line, and we spent top of the show talking about Broderick Jones, and he's gonna have to grow up in a hurry, and it's unfortunate he missed. You obviously would like him coming into this camp having played 800, 900 snaps in the NFL, but that didn't happen. And his pedigree says that even though his rookie season was almost all wiped out because of an injury, you got to get past that. You're expected to take the same step forward in year number 2 that you would have taken had you played 800 snaps. So he's got a lot of making up to do, and hopefully he along with Broderick Jones, hopefully he doesn't miss time during training camp, because that's very crucial. You need to see this guy, need to get this offensive line together on the field for as many preseason snaps as possible here, because a lot is expected out of this youngish type group. Sans obviously Isaac Seumalo, who hasn't been on the field yet during training camp practice as well. And we've talked about the depth concerns several times, not only the depth as a whole on the offensive line, but the tackle position in particular there. So yeah, I think he knows I think he knows the challenge that's ahead of him, and I think he knows the expectations ahead of him this summer as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's reasonable, and I still generally am cautiously optimistic about Fautanu this year, despite still being pretty sight unseen for me personally. But I do think the Broderick Jones conversation and his issues that are now compounding and have come up again with his if he play to start camp, now the injury, it's giving Fautanu a bit of cover in a sense, because we don't talk about him so much, and there's still so much for him to prove. And it's not to sit there and say he's been bad, he's taken some lumps against TJ Watt, but hey, who hasn't? As you said, it's a good opportunity. It makes facing everyone else a whole lot easier. But who's to say Fautanu is going to be the first round pick that Pittsburgh drafted him to be? That it really is a critical year for him, and it just does not get discussed much because he wasn't playing, he was hurt, he was out of sight, out of mind last year, and Broderick Jones dominates the offensive line topic. But these two young tackles, Dave, Jones and Fautanu, are going to really define the progress this offense's team makes.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of pressure on those two guys in particular. And look, they're expected to run the ball out of shoot. And we see these drills early in the camp of these rapid fire, these quarterbacks getting the ball out of their hand quick. And I don't think that's by accident either. I think they want to protect, especially a guy like Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career as well. So yeah, I mean, we're just going to have to see this thing progress the rest of training camp and into the preseason. And hopefully those two bookends are ready to go because this offensive line, especially at the top of the season, and we've talked about the schedule and how it sets up that they better have a fast start because of the way things transpire. After they get back from even Ireland in week 4 there. So yeah, there's a lot on these tackles.
Quick sidebar here, and I'm just reading a tweet. Minkah Fitzpatrick, who had his contract reworked yesterday, a little bit of upfront money, speaking with the media today, Dave, and this is not in quotation, so I don't know if this is a direct quote from Joe Schad or a paraphrasing, but Fitzpatrick saying about why he hadn't spoken to the media previously and why he'd been kind of radio silent. This is me reading Shad's tweet, quote, "I am not a big social media guy. I'm not frustrated to be here. I appreciated my time in Pittsburgh. It's unfortunate, but it's business. My silence was not a reflection of my excitement to be here. I'm proud to be here," end quote from Joe Schad. I'm sure we'll hear more from Minkah throughout either the show or certainly on the site, but Fitzpatrick speaking for the first time in his return to Miami.
Yeah, and Omar Kelly, who covers the Dolphins, put out there that Minkah said it was reported that I wanted a new contract. I just wanted to know that I was going to be here for more than a season. And what they did with him anyway, they added what they just reconfigured his contract and all. There's no new money in here. They moved $2 million up from 2026 to 2025 for him. So he is getting more cash in his pocket. He's getting 17.5 million versus 15.5 million. And what they did is they took the good chunk of his base salary all the way down to the minimum allowed in the CBA for his accredited seasons, turned that into a signing bonus, and then they added 3 void years on the end of that. And what that effectively did is lowered his cap charge in 2025 by almost $11 million there. So he gets $2 million more in cash this year. And look, he had no guaranteed money going into this year. Now all that was the signing bonus is guaranteed, so he's got that security there. But I don't know if he's got that commitment of more than just 1 year, to be honest with you, because I mean, he is scheduled to have a pretty decent salary next year, and it doesn't look like there's any guaranteed money. At least I haven't heard the report that there's guaranteed that next year's salary is guaranteed. Maybe that'll come out in the wash. But I wouldn't think it's going to happen, but it sounds like there is at least a plausibility of him being one and done in Miami if this season doesn't go well.
Can you explain where the reporting of a $16 million signing bonus comes from Fitzpatrick and why that maybe doesn't really represent what transaction occurred with his contract?
Yeah, because of what they were, he was scheduled a $15.5 million base salary in 2025 after he was traded to the Dolphins. And then they took $2 million and added from 2026 and added that to 2025. And then they took the chunk of that $17.5 million, which was a $16 million and something and some change, and then turned it into a signing bonus.
Okay, so they just took his base salary, converted it to a signing bonus, added void years to reduce his cap charge, and that's how they kind of worked around giving him a little extra new money, not new money, but money from next year, right?
Right.
And still not increasing their cap charge on him this year.
Right, and they lowered it significantly,
Right.
almost 11 million. So, the fact of the matter is they gave him 2 million more this year from next year's money.
I know we'll never know for sure, but do you think Pittsburgh saw that contract desire of having some sort of security becoming an issue with Fitzpatrick? Is that one reason maybe why he was dealt?
Well, the last time he got an extension, he only had 1 year left on his deal, and the Steelers don't like doing the 2-year out, type thing, and they obviously didn't do that with TJ again this time around as well too. I don't think he well. We're trying to go through this on the fly here with Minkah speaking, so we don't have everything that he's had to say. I would imagine that this kind of caught him off guard. In other words, I don't think Minkah was. We'll see. I could be completely wrong because we'll get this transcript probably an hour after we get off this podcast here. I don't get a sense that Minkah wanted out. I don't get a sense that Minkah was fining for additional money this year or a new contract. I just think this ended up being a piece of the puzzle that the Steelers, for all the reasons that Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin have given. Sometimes it's hard to part with good players, but I think this is what they needed to do to get the deal done. I think they probably looked at their defense and how Minkah fit in that moving forward and wanted to go a different direction. Minkah probably was still expecting to be the tied to the post guy, and that I think a lot of layers to it. I don't think contract played a part in Minkah no longer being a Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the short and short of my interpretation of this, and it'll be interesting to look at the rest of the press conference of Minkah from today.
All right, fair enough. And so we'll have that on the site if we don't cover those comments throughout the rest of today's show. But Minkah speaking for the first time as a returned Dolphin today.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dave, back to the Steelers players. Any other comments from players over the last couple of days that have stuck out to you?
Not so much. I wanted to go back to what Tomlin had to say about to Kyle Brandt. Kyle Brandt, we've had some fun and talked about it. It's a talking point a lot anytime Mike Tomlin's brought up, especially that he hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. The tagline that you always get with Mike Tomlin is he hasn't had a losing season since being the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that streak and yada yada. And Kyle Brandt essentially asked Mike Tomlin if that holds any relevance there. And Mike Tomlin says, it doesn't mean a lot as I sit here today. Let's be honest, like most of these guys that I coach, it doesn't resonate with. 19, 18 years ago, a lot of these guys were in car seats. You weren't in a car seat still at that time. You probably could fit a car seat.
Probably. I think legally I still have to be in a car seat. I'm skirting the law on that one.
I'd take an unfair shot at you here.
Yeah, what the heck? I don't deserve that.
And so they respect it, but it's not something that is of value for them. And so why would I put my business on this collective? I'm just focused on this collective and what we can do together. I think I owe them that. And really, at the end of the day, I doubt that anybody cares. It's just a nice, cool thing for you guys to talk about or use as an intro when you're talking about me or hope for my demise.
Tomlin has made this comment because he's been asked the question, I know at least once before, and gave the same answer. And, what can you really say to it if you're Mike Tomlin? I don't think he really rests on his laurels and takes especially point of pride in the record. He might appreciate it, probably appreciate it more in his post-coaching days. But, in Pittsburgh, it's a dirty word. It's the phrase that everyone hates, and understandably so, because Pittsburgh is not supposed to be defined by non-losing seasons and simply making the playoffs. Their standards are supposed to be and meant to be set much higher than that. So I think Tomlin said basically what you have to say. It doesn't matter because if you sit there and celebrate it, which I don't think Tomlin does, but if he did, celebrate the stat, then he'll just take more heat for that. So I just think overall it's the right answer. It's a little tidbit, but it doesn't mean much. I think the more interesting stat in that same vein is that Pittsburgh under Tomlin has played all of just one meaningless game in his tenure, one game that didn't count where Pittsburgh was eliminated from the playoffs. That happened, I always forget, 2012 or 2013, one of those 8-8 seasons where the finale they were out of it. So I think that is actually a more impressive stat than he never had a losing season stat, but they all are kind of in the same boat of not meaning a whole lot in the grand scheme of Pittsburgh's goals.
Look, I don't think Mike Tomlin has a mini replica of Acrisure Stadium in his office, and then after every non-losing season, does he go hang up like a little mini banner up there in the rafter and all like that? Nor should he. I think he's cognizant of that streak, and I think he is cognizant, though, that he also has not won a playoff game since 2016 and how that's the larger bit of the conversation right now. I think the whole non-losing season thing and the meaningful game aspect is stuff that gets talked about later after his coaching days are over, when you're talking about potential candidacy for Hall of Fame, because in and of itself, and we'll see how much longer this streak runs, obviously, and how much more time he has in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's at its core, it's an impressive streak, right? But
sure, you can appreciate it,
right? But is it something that fans of this team take pride in, especially along with the fact that they haven't won a playoff game in 2016? So, yeah, I think it holds water, but I do think, as Tomlin said, it's more of something cool to talk about, in an intro or when you hope for his demise, but it's more of something that should be highlighted and talked more about. The next time, hopefully this year, that he wins a playoff game, and then on top of it, when you're talking about his candidacy for Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more interesting if Pittsburgh wasn't just skirting by that bar of winning 9 games and just getting over the hump and just doing enough to keep that streak alive, quote unquote. And if it didn't feel like the standard was being dropped in Pittsburgh, where it went from Super Bowl contention to AFC contention to playoff contention to have a non-losing season, I think there's the frustration there, rightfully so, and the bar dropping in Pittsburgh in terms of what's a successful year and what should be expected and what the outcome should be. So those are the reasons why that stat is so disliked in Pittsburgh, and I get it. That's not a stat I really ever celebrate.
Agreed. But it is, look, for playing in a division that this team plays in, and to have done it, and to go through all the changes that an organization goes through with key players, and specifically the quarterback position, for as long as he's done it, to not have a non-losing season is impressive. But once again, you're measured by Lombardies and playoff wins, and he's got to get this team back on track with that.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
he knows it.
Anything else from the Tomlin interview? Everything else was pretty boilerplate.
Yeah, nothing overall stuck out to me when it comes to that.
Dave, last call for any other player commentary, any other interesting tidbits that might have been spoken over the last couple days? Anything I'm missing?
Not that comes to my head. We'll probably have a few more sound clips before Wednesday's show, and maybe we could do a greatest hits at that time. But nothing really stood out overall.
All right, Dave, let's talk about what to expect throughout these next 6 days of training camp. Pads coming on Tuesday. The team will be in pads most days, not every day. I believe the NFL mandates you can't be in pads more than either 3 or 4 consecutive days. So I imagine they'll be in pads Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe not in pads Thursday, so they can be in pads for the Friday practice and throughout the weekend, and then have the off day on Monday. So what are you watching for when the pads come on and it really feels like football again?
Backs on backers, obviously. Looking forward to the Caleb Johnson sessions in particular. I think that's the first thing on my mind. What tackles are out there? How are they performing? We talked a lot about Broderick Jones, Troy Fautano. Let's see, the center quarterback exchanges have had a little bit of hiccups so far. I'm looking forward for the offense to start taking more positives overall in these practices, because based on everything that you've reported so far, it's been the defense running the show through the non-padded practices so far. Not a lot of big plays, not a lot of contested catches. Still feels like the offense is trying to find their way with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. So once the pads go on, look, it gets dialed up even more at that point, right? So I'd like to see this offense start winning maybe some of these 7 shots. Us talking about guys like Roman Wilson starting to make plays. I want to hear more about offense success, I guess, overall.
Yeah, I just want to see some individual matchups, and the backs on backers will be a big one. Caleb Johnson, the rookie, of course, that's going to be one that'll be highlighted. Can this guy pass protected and have to do it a ton at Iowa? Can he protect Aaron Rodgers when the season starts? And just kind of his willingness, his his technique in this drill. Mike Tomlin talked about in the coverage drill, linebackers, running backs, and tight ends. Kenneth Gainwell versus Peyton Wilson, 2 athletic guys, a coverage guy in Wilson, a receiving type in Gainwell. Who can win that battle? Of course, the receivers, DBs, I may not have an eye towards that on Tuesday because I'll be watching backs on backers. They take place at the same time, but Jalen Ramsey, DK Metcalf, and Roman Wilson draw some buzz after a pretty quiet first 4 days. Those are drills slanted towards the offense, but still you want to see Wilson go out there and make some plays. So those are kind of some things off the top. And then just watching Trench play in general in team periods, the live tackling session, the run period, where you can really start to evaluate some of these offensive linemen, defensive linemen. The one-on-one competition drills will take place later in practice. O-line, D-line, Fautanu versus, Watt, and probably Nick Herbig as well. Is Broderick Jones healthy? Is he working? Of course, McCormick, see his technique, his pad level in his second season. Some of these young guys who can emerge. Dylan Cook, a big camp for him, talked about that top of the show. Can there be an offensive lineman to emerge? An Aiden Williams, a Doug Nestor, a Gareth Warren, somebody like that. Stephen Jones has gotten guard and tackle work. So can one of those young second, third team offensive linemen really perk up this week? That'll be kind of top of my list of things to watch for.
And look, having the pads on and these many practices right in a row after this first day off on Monday here, you think that these players have learned about conditioning, their conditioning levels so far, they're really going to learn about it because Mike Tomlin loves these late after or early after, whatever time you want to call it, what 1 o'clock practices because of the heat and the humidity and all like that. And this time of year with all the rain in Pittsburgh, it's going to be humid, and you've already got Mike Tomlin talk about some heat related things, and now you're going to put helmets on them and pads on top of it there. So I think a big question that'll get answered is how really good is the conditioning of this team? And look, he'll give some of these veterans days off, I'm sure, but what about the in between guys? How do they hold up throughout what? And look, it all comes to an end after Friday night. Friday Night Lights, to keep that momentum up after a hard week of practice in pads, most of them in pads throughout these next several days. And that heat and humidity is the same kind of intensity there at the Friday Night Lights practice. And then how does the team come out from a health standpoint as they go into their second off day?
Well said, and a great point about the weather. Looking at the forecast right now for tomorrow's practice, high of 90, humidity almost 80%. So it's going to be hot, it's going to be humid, which has been the story of the first 4 days, and so that'll be tested. And training camp is really as much about how you finish, not just about how you start. So many guys, especially camp darlings in years past, have had hot starts that come out looking good here in these padless sessions, and they wilt over time when the pads come on. As you really get into the dog days of summer, into August, by the end of training camp, preseason action, your body's hurting, you're tired, you're beat up, you're feeling it, trying to push through physically and mentally. So it's really about the long game of training camp. Having one good practice is fine, and that's all well and good, but can you stack good days? And can you be consistent? Can you be dependable and trustworthy and earn that from the coaching staff? That matters so much more. So that's kind of how I look at training camp. It's a longer lens, more so than a snapshot in time.
Yeah, and over the course of these next several practices when the pads go on, one of my main takeaways from your reporting so far from the 4 days without pads is that this rookie draft class has done well. A lot of positives coming out of several individual guys. Even Black yesterday, I think, with a couple of pass breakdowns. We talked about Derek Harmon put some nice practices together. Caleb Johnson, for whatever he's been asked to do, his conditioning seems fine. Sawyer's had a good start of camp, according to you. We've even talked about Kent, the 7th rounder, here and there in these practices, making positive plays. So just looking forward to hopefully come the next day off when we're recapping what happened during the padded practice week, that we're still talking about most of those guys in a positive light.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a good start for many of the rookies, but long arc to training camp. Story is really interesting in these padded sessions, setting the edge against the run and run period, the one-on-one competition. I think he's had a really nice start to training camp. He's been a veteran-like in terms of his rush plan, arsenal moves, overall technique, and that's why Pittsburgh drafted him, not because he was some sort of raw lump of clay with big-time upside, but somebody that was refined and pretty much ready to go day one from a power program that made plays and was highly productive and well-coached. So that's a guy I'll be watching for, and a guy that's gotten a ton of reps, and I assume will continue to get a ton of reps because Watt will get days off, and even when he does practice, him and Highsmith are fairly limited in terms of their reps. They'll get kind of half reps and not have to, get 100% of the complement of starter snaps. So a guy like Sawyer will benefit greatly from that, especially if Jeremiah Moon continues to miss time, and Lee Alice had some good conditioning stuff in the past, and he had some conditioning stuff yesterday, didn't finish practice. So a lot of snaps for the taking for a young rookie like Jack Sawyer.
All right, so what are some of your takeaways for practices in?
Defense certainly has dominated so far, and some of that's to be expected. Defense still supposed to be the strength of this team, which has been true for 50 years, but true for this season overall. And the offense, new pieces having to gel, that can take some more time. The rookie class overall, I think, kind of showing some flashes of why they were drafted. Rodgers looking fine, some good, some bad, but, again, all my thoughts are up on the site, to start the day. And then the offensive line, the questions there about, okay, depth, how good do you have it? What about the starters, Broderick Jones? Those things still being concerns 4 days in.
All right. Look forward to getting you back out there on Tuesday there. Where do we need to go now? Can we wrap it up, or listener emails, or what?
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up, get to some reader emails, close out today's show. I should have mentioned top of the show. I apologize. We will not be doing a live stream tonight. We're scheduled to, but I got some stuff going on. Camp's a very, very busy time of year, but I have a video up on my YouTube channel and on SteelersDepot.com giving some overall thoughts, position group by position group breakdowns of the first 4 practices. So that'll be in place of the live stream tonight.
All right. Look forward to watching that. This one from, let's go to the reader emails and close out the show with this one from Yahoo. Great breakdown and analysis of Khan. Incomplete grade overall, but can evaluate a bunch of things. Things like positional value, creativity, willingness, flexibility, comp pick strategy all seem like strengths. Positional value of 3 straight first-round trenches, pounding trenches in general, letting running back walk, and swapping a safety for a cornerback are all major roster building. Also think going for it now while sitting there with 12 picks next year is major, he writes. But then come the unknown, player evaluation remains incomplete. First-round studs is a category of its own that still could be anywhere from 0 to 3. Non-first could be viewed as a plus, but still incomplete. He says, I applaud the willingness of the signings, acquisitions, but jury's out overall. Then, of course, franchise quarterback and incomplete until they try again. Looking at it all that way, he says, I think it's a positive that Khan typically grades out as either favorable or incomplete.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's favorable. I guess in the sense there hasn't been a lot of like objectively bad moves so far. Some of it's been kind of undoing the mistakes and pitfalls of the end Colbert seasons. But yeah, like I said, this is a big year, I think, overall for Khan and the evaluation in terms of the offensive line, the trench vision, and then of course trying to find that quarterback next year. So just say the next 12 to 18 months will be very important for, I think, Khan's outlook in terms of the job he's done.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Caleb in here. Greetings from Florida. With TJ Watt signed, Aaron Rodgers in town, Ramsey and Jonnu Smith on the roster, do you think the rest of the AFC North, specifically the Ravens and Bengals, consider the Steelers a real threat? To me, in my own opinion, the Ravens looked light years in front of the division last year. The last time I had that feeling was back in 2013 with the Ravens went to the Super Bowl and the Steelers looked average at best. So his question is do you think the Steelers, do you think these teams like the Ravens and the Bengals look at all the stuff that the Steelers have done and now consider them a real threat or not?
I don't spend much time pondering what, to use the Mike Tomlin phrase, the Joneses are thinking about Pittsburgh. All I care about what is and not what the perception is. But yeah, no one's overlooking Pittsburgh, especially Baltimore. That history, the rivalry, the Harbaugh, Tomlin back and forth. Every game seems close no matter who the victor is. I know Baltimore obviously won those final 2 games more convincingly last year, but it's Steelers, it's Ravens. It's going to be tight. You know, Pittsburgh has made improvements this year to hopefully rectify some of the issues of a season ago. I mean, I think those games are always going to be viewed in this, it's going to be intense and close, and who knows who's going to win. It's going to come down to the last couple minutes, who makes a play late. So, yeah, I think in an answer, yes, Baltimore still sees Pittsburgh as a threat.
Yeah, and look, this team, at least on paper, looks like it's gotten better this offseason. A lot of changes.
Yeah. Hopefully the offense can be more potent and explosive. The run game can be better, and the defense can be more physical and hold up against the run. So I think Pittsburgh has responded to what they see around them, which is something front offices and coaches often do. Is let's look at our division. Who are we beating, and what do we need to acquire to be able to combat that? And the number 1 passing game last year, Dave, was the Bengals, and so Pittsburgh went out there and added cornerbacks and Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey to deal with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Yosebas and Joe Burrow. Number 1 rushing game in the NFL last year with the Baltimore Ravens. So Pittsburgh got more physical. They invested in D-line and trench work in the draft with Derek Harmon, Y.A. Black, and Jack Sawyer. And, we're getting Malik Harrison to play maybe some run snaps as well. So, Pittsburgh's in a tough spot where they have to face the best passing attack in the NFL and the best rushing attack in the NFL 4 times a year combined between Cincinnati and Baltimore. So you better have a defense that can respond to all of that. And I think Pittsburgh's offseason moves are reflective of that.
All right, well said. We'll end this one with kind of a soapbox email from Jeff Kinney, and it's titled "The View Never Changes." Growing up in Pittsburgh during the 70s, everyone had the expectation that we would win the Super Bowl every year. Having also lived in Cleveland and Cincinnati, I've always been incredulous when their fans would go long to make the playoffs or win a playoff game. In the NFL, that is not necessarily a springboard nor promise that the following year will be better due to the continuous roster turnovers, injuries, etc. He says, I cringe whenever I hear Steeler fans, insiders, or analysts talking in those terms. Players almost never utter those words, he writes. There is only one thing that matters in the NFL, and that is being the Super Bowl champion this year. Upsets occur, the ball bounces in strange ways, and it is a game of inches. The belief that this can be our year is the best part of being a fan. There are no participation trophies. Even winning your division or conference is unsatisfying unless it leads to that Lombardi. Just ask Marv Levy, Marty Schottenheimer, Bud Grant, Dan Reeves, Don Coryell, Fran Tarkenton, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, Randy Moss, Chris Carter, etc. Agree or disagree? If you're not the lead dog, the view never changes. Well, look, I mean, Jeff, what do all 32 teams have a goal of doing every year? It's obviously winning the Super Bowl. And yeah, I know around the NFL, some fans probably of some of these teams just want to get into playoffs and maybe win a playoff game. They're probably realistic in when it comes to winning a Super Bowl. But right now, everybody's undefeated right now. And there's a section of the fan base, and they're fanatical in the aspect of, there's a group within every fan base that believes this year can be the year, right? Even though the odds and everything else would tell you otherwise. So, yeah, look, and I believe Omar Khan more years than most. I think they're taking every opportunity to change this roster up, and I think if you put them on the lie detector test right now and said, do you honestly believe that you can compete for a Super Bowl championship this year? I believe they would pass that, because I think deep down inside they believe that.
How close are they to that belief being realized, in the sense of at least being a contender that can compete with the big boys of the AFC?
Yeah, I'm not there where I'm thinking I'm going to be picking them to win it this year.
So why does the team think that, or seem to think that?
They see things they're in the building every day,
So what are they seeing that we aren't seeing?
I guess they're seeing that they've got a veteran quarterback that's won in the NFL, won a Super Bowl in the NFL, that's got at least one more season with him, that can take the offense the way Arthur Smith wants to run it and get it accomplished on the ground. And I believe they're building this defense to be the supreme rock throwing champion of 2025, whereas they keep the score down, and they'll believe that they'll be in every game this season and can thus stack 12, 13, 14 wins if things roll right. So I think they believe that their defense is the thing that can power this thing, and that if they stay close in games, more so than less, that they'll pull out their fair share of the wins and get into the tournament. And their viewpoint is if they get into the tournament and they get some luck and they're healthy and they do the right things in some certain games, they can make a run for this.
I know we are not psychologists by trade, at least. We've tried to play the role sometimes, but how much do you think that thought is a sincere belief this team holds, and how much of it do you think is just in their DNA and they're wired to always believe they're Super Bowl contenders, whether they really are or not true contenders?
Yes.
You think it's both?
I think it's all of it. I think in their heart of hearts, they believe that in the locker room. I think that's what's going to be sold to them. Or that's what's being sold to them, that we're going to be a good defensive team. We've rebuilt this roster, had a lot of turnover, more so than even what they generally do. Added some pedigree people in this team, and we've got Aaron Rodgers once again on the offensive side of the ball that's going to pull out a couple of these close games more times than not.
All right, fair enough.
All right, Jeff, thanks for the email. And that's a good place to leave off, I think, as we move forward into this first off day of training camp practice 2025. So with that, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Make a PayPal donation that way. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. So until Tuesday night, which will be our next special edition of the Terrible Podcast, recapping training camp practice. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.